And, and thanks everybody for coming on today. I find myself kind of hurriedly searching through the names to see how many of you I've had the pleasure of meeting before, and just as importantly, how many of you might have attended the Building Bridges week in Geneva, which was just a couple of weeks ago, and some of you may have been able to attend one of the sessions that Baraka hosted there. As well as other programming that's focused on this broad topic of health investment in emerging markets. I had the experience during the Geneva Building Bridges Week a couple weeks ago of being with like-minded people, a lot of others who are thinking in detail about this space. And it's very rewarding to talk to other people who are thinking about the same problems that we at Baraka are thinking about. But I also want to make sure that I'm not preaching to the converted, that we're sharing net new information and giving ourselves a forum where we can exchange new ideas that are on the edge of this evolving field of health investment in emerging markets. You know, this is a quarterly program now that Baraka is running. We find we're really privileged to have incredible people in our network, including those that are with us today. And I'll introduce you to each one of them in just a couple of minutes. First of all, about formatting. I'm going to give Mukesh Sharma, Frank Aswani, and Carolina Batista each about 5 to 10 minutes to present their work, their thinkings on the topic of data and how it drives health investment. And then we'll move into an open session where I'll pose some general questions to them on the topic area, and we'll keep that kind of casual between the panelists. And then we'll leave lots of times for Q&A. So there'll be plenty of time for people to come in with their own perspectives, questions, and comments. So that's how we're going to lay this out. I also want to acknowledge with the speakers that we have here today, and this was, I have to admit to you, a little bit of a coincidence. We ended up with Carolina Batista in Brazil, Frank Aswani in South Africa, and Mukesh Sharma in India. So we have excellent on-the-ground representation from 3 of the largest developing regions in the world. And I think that's the kind of global perspective that is absolutely warranted at this time. The problems we're solving for, that is driving capital to the health sector in emerging markets, is a global problem. And it will absolutely require global stakeholders. And we need to look at investors and investees who themselves are thinking transnationally. That's the way we begin to move into new directions. So I'm completely pleased with this incredible group of speakers that have showed up. And at the risk of repeating myself, and again, giving you messages that you may already know, I want to reiterate why I think this is a really unique juncture in history that we've reached. 3 macro trends that I think are driving an era of opportunity. Now, and that is the incredible advances in technology, everything from mobile access to point of care diagnostics, to cloud-based data solutions, to AI-based clinical decision support, all of which are available, accessible in low resource settings. So this has accelerated in the last 3 to 5 years. And for any of us who've been in the field of global health for a while, the difference in technology and its implications for solving problems is palpable. It's different. The second thing that's occurring in tandem is the concentration of knowledge capital. That is people with a diverse set of knowledge, not just clinicians. We need clinicians in the room always, but not just clinicians, also data scientists, engineers, business strategists, policy advocates, all of these different types of expertise that are coming into developing regions. They either are there, have gone and gotten education abroad and are returning, or they're cultivating their own knowledge base in country. but there is a lot of brains at the table now that weren't there in the same concentrated way just 5 to 10 years ago. And then the other thing is something which all of us know, and boy, I'll tell you, here in Switzerland today, I'm really feeling it. This pandemic has made us all pay attention in a different way. And it's made the world across sectors, way outside of health, think about health systems in a way that most of the world had not prior. And I maintain, and I've made this statement a number of times in public settings recently, that it has aligned priorities, that all of the stakeholders within global health are starting to see the same gaps and beginning to identify the same solutions towards addressing those gaps. So the significance, one of the most significant points on which I think there's alignment right now, is the need for private sector engagement. That means both the innovator, who's coming from the private sector with ideas that are market specific, that are scalable, that are based on their own understanding of their own market situation, as well as private capital and private investment in order to drive forward and actually make a difference. We will be getting into this in a little bit more detail later, but I think most of the people on the call understand the gap between what is needed, an estimated 370 billion annually, to meet the SDG 3 targets in the poorest countries, versus what is made available through foreign assistance and classic forms of aid, ODA. That's 1.4 billion. We have a gap of roughly 230 to 240 billion annually. There's no way that that's going to be met without private capital. So this program, like all of our programs, are looking towards the levers that are going to enable that capital, they're going to catalyze that capital. One thing that we've really noticed at Baraka Impact Finance, and we see again and again in our conversations with multilateral organizations, with other finance institutions, with development experts, is the need for data to drive decision-making. We've got to de-risk investment opportunities so that private capital feels safe to come in and take some risk. And we need to measure the social impact that we're claiming we're going to get. Both of those goals require data which is not easily accessible, not easily visible to the average investor. For those who were able to attend the Building Bridges program that we did a couple of weeks ago, there's a very bright private investor out of the UK Geneva offices, family office, Lacuna Advisors. That's Dr. Shannon Shibata Germano, who was on our panel. And in prepping for the panel that she attended, and in her comments during the session, she says in her network of private investors who are interested in trying to make a difference in the health sector of emerging markets, they come up against the volume of data that's needed, against the depth and the complexity of the due diligence that surrounds each and every individual investment decision, and the majority of them walk away. It's too much. It isn't cost effective for them to do this work themselves, and they lack access to the data that can assure them to make the necessary investment decisions. So that's why we identified the need for programming like this. And of course, this is just one session. We hope that there will be many more. And we, just like happened in our September session, it generated a lot of conversations, some with those of you who are on the line again today, and with others. And we hope that this will do the same thing. We at Baraka are available for conversations, and I know that that's true about Frank Aswani, who I'll introduce in just a moment, and Mukesh Sharma, who are well-networked individuals with really interesting and dynamic projects going on. And we hope that this session will generate a lot more conversation. Okay. one thing as I was preparing for this, Mukesh, I was looking at Mentera Ventures, and I'll start here now and talk a little bit about Mentera. And it's one of your partners who, in an introductory video, says that at Mentera, what you're looking to do is to optimize versus maximize investment performance. And I think when we're talking about social impact based investments, that's exactly the way to look at it. How do we optimize what we're doing? Yes, financial return is part of the picture that is being pursued here, but it's not just about maximizing that return, it's about optimizing the impact. So that particular piece really stuck with me, and I wanted to make sure I used it in prepping this conversation today. So I'm going to go on now. I'm going to introduce to all of you Mukesh Sharma. He's the co-founder of Mentera Venture Advisors. Mentera invests for impact across 3 sectors: agriculture, education, and healthcare. And they have an integrated incubator funder model. As you say, they stay closely with their investees all the way through the initial due diligence, probably the investment, and then eventually the exit. And we'll have Mukesh talk to us in some detail about Mentera's approach, including a couple of really interesting healthcare oriented investments or healthcare focused investments. Mukesh, before his role at Mentera, was a senior investment advisor at Vilgro Innovations Foundation, and many of you will be familiar with Vilgro. They're a real pioneer in entrepreneurial support in the developing world, specifically in India. Before that, he worked in investment management with multiple firms, and then he has a bachelor's in international business, commerce, and trade from Gujarat University. In prepping for this conversation, Mukesh also shared some really poignant personal stories, which drove his own attention to the health sector and to generating impact. I'm going to start, before Mukesh gets going here, I'm going to share a brief video about an existing company that Mukesh and team are working with. Give me 1 second here. Hold on. This is just a quick 2-minute piece, but I think it sets a really nice tone. So let me. Sets a nice tone if it runs. Sorry, folks, there we go.
The big problem with healthcare in India is that the disease profile of the country is changing very rapidly. We need a lot more preventive health. We need affordable, high quality health to be delivered to underserved communities at the prices at which they can afford.
We believe our device can detect infections early on and significantly bring down the amputation rate. We have finally validated the product and entering the market space. Now it's being used in 2 hospitals, and we are really planning to scale up from now on.
This guy is a treated leprosy patient. He developed this very hypertrophic ulcer, which is not healing despite multiple courses of antibiotics. So we've taken the image, and now the device is just going to use its artificial intelligence algorithm. We'll get to know whether the wound is infected, and if it's infected, where it's infected. Before this device, we would actually have to take a biopsy. It might take as long as 7 days to help grow the slow-growing bacteria. This takes a minute.
So antimicrobial resistance actually can be attributed to one of the causes, basically could be misuse or overuse of antibiotics, which is not needed. So this device can help in this regard.
So this is the baseline image. This green image shows the amount of infection the patient has. And in a span of 40 minutes and over serial images, we can see with the help of debridement how the infection is going down. You don't need to give the patient any antibiotic. And in the span of about an hour or so, he's here, you've cleaned the tissue, he can just have it dressed and go home. It's a very positive outcome for him as well as us. the patient goes home satisfied. So yeah, everyone's happy. It is completely revolutionary. The more you use it, the better it gets. And the algorithm keeps getting better. And every couple of months, we get new use case scenarios.
What really excites me is I want to get into food, I want to get into water, I want to get into any kind of pathogen detection. And now with Mentera, we are able to diversify, make it big, and explore a lot of options.
Great. And without further ado, I'm going to turn over the screen to Mukesh and allow him to tell us about Weibo and many other projects that Mentera is currently involved in. Go ahead, Mukesh.
Thank you, James. I'm sharing my screen and I'll run through a few slides. So great to be here. Thank you for playing that video that really sums up the work that many of our entrepreneurs are doing. So as James mentioned, we are focused on addressing biggest issues facing agriculture, healthcare, and education in India, but without compromising on commercial returns. So both impact and the returns need to go hand in hand for this to really work. And as James mentioned, optimizing for impact is very important for us. We start with very clearly defined impact objectives for each of our sectors. So in healthcare, we are clearly focused on improving the quality of care that is being given, the access metric we look at very carefully, and the cost metrics. Because for a country such as ours in resource-constrained settings, if you look at the amount of underinsured population that we have, we need to focus on all three of these together. These are three companies that we have invested in so far: Biosense, Omics, and Adivo Diagnostics. You just saw a video of Adivo. Biosense story is even older. It was a DOM startup. It started from an engineering college in Mumbai when two of the founders in their rural stint, they were biomedical engineers and doctors. They saw quite a few deaths because of malnutrition, and they asked themselves that, look, diagnosing malnutrition is not too difficult and treating it is not too difficult. So why should anyone be dying because of that? And then they committed to creating a non-invasive hemoglobin measurement device, because many of the disconnected parts of the country, you go to desert areas, hilly regions, tribal areas of the country, you don't have much of the healthcare infrastructure, right? But without using some of the advancement in technology that you see, cloud connectivity, geotagging, without that data, you can't really deliver targeted interventions. So what you see picture towards the left, these are girls in a tribal school. All of them are being screened through their device. The data goes on the cloud, and you can really tell the government which districts, which villages have higher incidence of malnutrition. And now we have a unique identity for each person in our country, and where you are allowed to use it, following all the privacy guidelines. You can really pinpoint to high-risk patients, so the government can intervene early. This was a program that the Tribal Ministry and Women and Child Development Ministry implemented, because if the girl child is malnourished, the child born to that girl is also going to be malnourished, right? So that's a very powerful targeted use that one can see here. Omics Labs to the right is a molecular biology platform, and Adivo you saw. All three companies, incubated by us from the idea stage. Biosense, it took us 8 years from DOM startup to acquisition by PerkinElmer, which is one of the S&P 500 companies. The Indian subsidiary bought, fully acquired Biosense. We were able to exit with more than 30% IRR in a short period of about 3.5 years from the time we invested in the company. So when we say, commercial returns, there is definitely a potential. We are seeing some good progress with Adivo, and in multiple transactions, we have been able to prove not only the impact at scale, deep impact, we've been able to see good commercial success also. I'll talk about a few data points because James said, let's focus on data. So availability of capital in India, definitely an issue. This is a data that was done by Ken, which is a good publication. So they looked at 9 years, 80,000 startups in India, only 8% received seed funding. If you look at Series B, Series C, which is when you get path to profitability, it's a very small number. Only 300 companies out of 80,000 got Series C funding in India. And this includes all the sectors combined. This is not healthcare, right? This is all, social, mainstream, everything combined. So, while everybody looks at India and says, wow, big economy, lot of money. But if you look at it, there's poor allocation to many sectors of the economy and many parts of the country. Healthcare is one of those. While capital is a problem, even bigger problem is efficient use of capital. Many of us have seen this, valley of death. Valley of death, historically, if you see in US and Silicon Valley, shows single CASM. In a place like India, in a sector like healthcare, you don't have a single CASM. You have 3, in many cases, 4 CASMs, right? Because you have to go through research, you have to go through regulatory approvals, you have to, do clinical trials and show the evidence of efficacy that it's working. Then you have to build early market, and then you have to get to profitability. So just because you've been through first step doesn't mean you'll go through second, third, and fourth. Because like I said, capital is not freely available. The whole continuum of support and whole continuum of funding has not been built. Because of that, that gets really difficult. And if we are focused on social impact, focus on optimizing, really reaching low income segments, then you're dealing with very tight unit economics. Now you put the tight unit economics alongside multiple CASMs and not having a conveyor belt, smooth conveyor belt of funding and support, and that's where the challenges start to look at. Now, if we look at Indian federal budget 2019-20, I deliberately took it pre-COVID because in COVID, a lot of resources were diverted to health. Of the government's budget, only 2% went to healthcare, right, in India. So it's a very small amount of money that from public funding that is going there. This was a question that was asked to Bill Gates, philanthropy role to play, and James made that point also at the beginning. And Bill Gates talked about it in one of the platforms in India, saying that, look, we have $100 billion, but when you look at 1.3 billion, even if they were to put all of that money in one shot in India, it's not even $100 per capita, right? So, while philanthropy has a role to play, government has a role to play. You just saw 2% from government. You can do per capita here. There's absolutely no way we are going to solve these problems without attracting private capital. And even after we attract private capital, we are still not going to be solving it without all the different parts, government, philanthropy, impact really working together. Disease burden in the country, if you look at in India, 1990s, almost 55% deaths in India were because of communicable diseases, right? Maternal, neonatal, nutritional. That number has gone down to now 27.5. So when you are looking at non-communicable diseases, which is almost 62%, earlier if someone was sick, you could do just a single intervention at that point in time and it worked. With non-communicable diseases, if you are not diagnosing for it, if you are not going for prevention, if it's a chronic disease, right? So adherence to whatever treatment protocols has to be followed is a challenge. So it's not only an issue of a very large economy, very large population, but also the change of disease profile. And that's where we really need to see where are we allocating capital. This data is very, very important. Now, I talked about, Indian economy, 2.6 trillion. We saw capital issue. Only $10 billion is, available, which is 40 basis points. It's a rounding error. More than half of it goes into unicorns, which are, $1 billion plus companies. If you look at social enterprises, they get just $1 billion, which is 4 basis points. And 80% of this is invested in financial inclusion and energy. So there's very limited amount of money available for healthcare to really address some of the issues that we are seeing. And there is opportunity to develop technologies and address some of these issues through innovative models. I'll pause here and happy to answer any further questions later. Over to you, James. Thank you.
Thank you, Mukesh. Super interesting. And there's like 10 questions I want to ask you, but I'll hold off. I'll keep us moving along, and then I'm gonna open this conversation for everybody here in just a bit. But let's hold on to those really interesting insights on the Indian market specifically, although I would argue there are some important global trends you also identified. And let's switch over to Frank Aswani. Frank is the CEO of the African Venture Philanthropy Alliance based in South Africa, but with a regional mandate. We're very interested in what AVPA is doing. You've taken a particularly entrepreneurial kind of approach with the organization since assuming the leadership there. Your work, Frank, as a partner in the Global Angel Investor Accelerator Program, the Deal Share platform, which you've set up, and I'm going to let you talk about this yourself, as well as the Africa-Asia Impact Investing platform and fellowship program. Super interesting stuff. And I really can tell you're taking an innovative approach to kind of channeling the power of angel networks and investors. And so, really, that's the reason we wanted to make sure you came on and had a chance to talk a little bit more broadly about this. Frank is formerly the Vice President of Director of Strategic Relations for the African Leadership Academy. He was also former Director of Regional Sales for Eli Lilly and Company, representing that large pharmaceutical firm throughout Sub Saharan Africa. Frank has an MBA from the University of Pretoria and is clinically trained in veterinary sciences at University of Nairobi in Kenya. Frank, without further ado, I'll turn this over to you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, James. So first of all, for pronouncing my name very well. My mother would be very proud of you. Well done. And then secondly, James, I think this is really great. I mean, listening to Mukesh talk, that a lot of that data could have been African data in many ways. And what's exciting about it is just the opportunity, the impact opportunities in the global South. I tell people, Africa in many ways is a sandbox of impact in the world. Our problems are fantastic impact opportunities. Now, I'm very proud to now just talk about the challenges that we face, because if you're playing in impact, you've got to be playing in Africa. And we have more than enough opportunities for you to come and not only deliver potentially globally scalable solutions, but also to test a lot of your models in Africa. I mean, if you think about where the dollar could go, there's no better place on how far you can stretch a dollar than you can do in Africa. And in many cases on the continent, innovation precedes regulation. So if we look at some of the really transformative innovations we've had on the continent, from what Zipline are doing with drones, or what M-Pesa has done with mobile money, and the opportunity behind just cell phone technology, it's been huge. And I strongly feel, this for me is probably the most exciting time to be playing in the impact space on the continent. So as James has said, I lead AVPA. We are a network of social investors. We're a nonprofit. We bring together investors deploying grants, debt, or equity into the social space. And the purpose is to help them collaborate so we can mobilize more money for optimal impact at deployment phase. We are headquartered in Nairobi. We've got offices in Johannesburg and in Lagos. The problem we're trying to solve is recognizing that there isn't enough money in our social sector to address our needs. If you look at some of the challenges that Africa is facing, our SDG financing gap is about $500 million a year between now and 2030. Traditionally, a lot of that money has come in from aid and government funding. We know for a fact that aid to Africa is declining. We've seen the UK government cut its aid budget. We've seen Trump cut USAID budget to Africa. And whether we like it or not, this is really the opportune time for us to be looking at how else do we fund social investment on the continent. And inevitably, the private sector becomes a more sustainable source of funding for the continent. But to James' earlier comments is, how do we make social investments attractive to the private sector? How do we de-risk them? How do we get a bit more creative with how we structure deals on that end? And we face some particular huge challenges in Africa. This whole impact space is very nascent. That's why for me it's very exciting, because we have upside all the way in terms of the activities we're doing in this space. We have some major capability challenges. For example, I don't know if you know this, but the whole continent of Africa has only one institution of learning with an innovative financing program. If you want to do impact investing or innovative financing in Africa using an African institution, you have one choice. That's the University of Cape Town. Otherwise, you've got to go to Oxford, Cambridge, and those other schools to learn as an African on how to be a competent player in this space. But as I said, this is exciting for us because as AVPA, we're trying to address all of these issues. So I'll walk a bit you through a couple of things we're trying to do to make it easier for social investors to connect to opportunities in Africa and connect to other investors on the continent. Recognizing that this data issue is a major challenge. Even for us who've lived up and grown in Africa, we struggle to get data to do not just in the healthcare space, but across many sectors. But we still are able to do business on the continent because we found other means of doing it. And part of it is leveraging local partnerships, local capacity. The cell phone, as I mentioned, has dramatically changed how data is made available on the continent, collected, distributed, and presented. And we're seeing a lot of innovation around that space. During the COVID crisis, we set up 3 communities of practice across Africa in Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa, pulling together about 600 organizations to support a quick response to COVID. And we help these organizations tackle multiple challenges from access to food to healthcare and you name it. From a healthcare perspective, one of the most interesting things I initially found out was when we went into this initiative, we were thinking, okay, are there some proven social enterprises that we can scale very quickly to help get access to solutions to where it was most needed? To our surprise, there were almost no databases on the continent of social enterprises. You couldn't go somewhere and find databases of scalable social enterprises on the continent. So there were just multiple gaps of data across the whole value chain. But once again, huge opportunities to do things differently. I think we should be very proud to be the generation that's been blessed with a crisis. They say never waste a crisis. And I think if we don't emerge from this crisis better than we went in, it'll be a huge shame on our kids that we were the parents who lived through this crisis and didn't do anything different. So there's huge upside for us all along. So at AVPA, we're trying to do a couple of different things to help make it easier for investors to play in this space. So first of all, I'm going to show you a couple of things that we do to support investors. The first thing we do is bring investors together to each other, to connect them to opportunities and to each other for co-investment purposes. We have a deal share platform, and you can find this on our website under the deal share drop-down menu. And this platform is designed to support, one, the kind of investor coming to Africa who has money and is looking for opportunities and for co-investment partners. This platform would help them significantly in that context. To an existing investor in Africa looking for additional capital for growth, scale, or exit. Now, the nature of our network, we bring together deployers of grants, debt, and equity because we believe it's a blending of not just the competences, but the resources amongst all those players with those 3 different types of capital that would be the sustainable solution to the continent's needs. So the deal share platform, we have anything from aid agencies, foundations, impact funds, PE funds, governments, DFIs as part of our network here. The network is sector agnostic. So when you go to the social sectors drop-down menu, you'll see we cover all sectors. We cover all the 17 SDGs. We cover all 54 African countries. We cover a variety of financial instruments that various social investors are using, and we'll keep adding to this as we go along. We cover different types of organizations as part of who was listed in here. The range of funding that we cover is broad, mainly helping the smaller ticket size investor, because that's where majority of the African investment deals need capital, but also the African investor generally tends to be a smaller ticket size investor. But we have a couple of deals that need $5, $10, $15 million on the platform, so we can play along the whole range. We also recognize it's not always about money, so there's also non-financial services offered on the platform. Now, AVPA is an investor-only community. We don't take in recipients of capital, we only take in deployers of capital. So all the deals on our deal share platform are listed by an existing investor in the deal. So in all of the deals you find on our platform, there's someone already with skin in the game. This really helps you, someone coming in from the outside in terms of due diligence and what have you, because you'll find a partner has already done a fair amount of that stuff already. So you look at the top left, for example, the business is Nature's Bounty, the investor is Samara Capital. They're looking for additional growth to grow in Nigeria. The business on the second one is Access Afya. Afya is Kiswahili for health, so this is a healthcare company. The existing investor is KSF Impact, and so on and so forth. So one of the good things about this platform is that you'll find huge co-investing opportunities, willing partners, and you'll find people who will help you in that due diligence process, share risk, and make it easier for you to make an investment decision. So that's a deal share platform. Happy to take up some questions about it later. We're also trying to create thematic platforms around specific themes. We started off with our gender platform, and under the gender platform, you can find investors in gender resources. It's connected to the deal share platform, so it doesn't just become a conversational platform, but also a transactional platform. You can link up to a couple other things. Within the deal share, the gender platform, we have communities of practice. We've got gender lens investment, which is really about supporting women-led businesses. Economic empowerment and livelihoods looks at grassroots poverty alleviation projects, and we've got a health and safety community of practice. So you can find your home fairly easily. And we have over 70 partners in here. It stretches from banks, foundations, you name it, you'll find them in here. So please feel free to check that out. The whole issue of data is an important piece of what we do. So we do a fair amount of research. We've just concluded about a year ago our social investment landscape mapping study, in which we mapped social investors across 18 countries in Africa, and we produced 4 reports. The study was funded by Rockefeller, Social Capital Foundation, and USAID. So you'll get an East Africa report, Southern Africa report, and West Africa report, and you'll get a Sub Saharan report as well. And if you go to the bottom, you'll find some annexures that may be of interest to you, looking at anything from key investment sectors, the COVID response report, and policy stuff that we're looking to do to follow through as well. Lastly, one of the things that we find is holding back a lot of our African social investors, and this came from our landscape study, was just a lack of know-how and the unconscious incompetence of a lot of our investors in impact investing and innovative finance. So we piloted an Africa-Asia Impact Fellowship Program, and this was deliberate because we believe in the Global South connections. This program was run by faculty from the Oxford Side Business School. We've literally just concluded it last week, phenomenally successful, and it brought together 61 fellows, 30 African, 30 Asian, a diversity of fellows from across the continent, covering almost 15 countries or so. And you'll see the people in Nigeria, South Africa, whatever. And if you go further down, you'll find the curriculum that they had to go through is also laid out at the bottom. Now, on the back of this, I'm super excited to announce that we've been approached by a healthcare company to do a similar program, but just for healthcare investors. Okay, and this program will be starting in April. James, if you're happy, would like to collaborate with you to have people join the program. We're doing this in collaboration with 2 others. I'll send an announcement next couple of days once I've got approval to make it public. But we're super excited about doing this for the healthcare community, and we'll be bringing together about 50 to 70 healthcare investors and a group of social entrepreneurs who are healthcare social entrepreneurs. But this is a key part of what we want to do. To address the issue of the lack of institutional capacity in Africa, we're also super excited to be at the tail end of a conversation with a group called the Impact Investing and Sustainable Finance Consortium, which is a faculty of 75 global business schools teaching impact investing and sustainable finance. And they are helping us design a train-the-trainer model through which we'll take 20 to 40 African business schools to help them be able to set up their own departments of innovative finance within their respective institutions in the next 6 to 8 months. So that group involves the likes of Harvard, Yale, Cambridge, and whatever, the usual suspects. And the joys of having African institutions in that community, for example, is all the curriculum. One of the advantages that all the curriculum from that community is made open source. So we can teach impact investing in Nairobi and Lagos using Harvard curriculum and Harvard research. So there'll be much greater collaboration from that perspective. So I'll stop there, James, for now.
Wow, Frank, even more than I was conscious of. Really, really impressive stuff. I have multiple questions, but I want to make sure there's time for everyone to chime in. One thing that I do want to kind of bring up that came to me as you're speaking, and I know for us at Baraka Impact Finance, this is something we think a lot about. And I know on this program right now, I see a number of names of company founders, entrepreneurs who are on the call as well. And one of the things I think this data does, during my conversation with you all today, I've been emphasizing how investors need this data. In fact, of course, investees also need this data. Founders and company entrepreneurs also need this data. And something that we find at Baraka that we're regularly involved in is helping founders build their narrative. So some of the resources that Frank was just talking about are excellent resources for the founder who's trying to construct the narrative of what their impact is going to be. The data is needed on all sides. So that actually segues nicely into me introducing my favorite work colleague, Carolina Batista. I have the pleasure of working with Carolina on an almost daily basis. Carolina is an infectious disease specialist with many years working in under-resourced and humanitarian settings with Doctors Without Borders, and later on with DNDi representing the Drugs for Neglected Diseases initiative in Latin America on their access campaigns. Carolina is currently active member of the Lancet's COVID Commission and sits also on Lancet's Migration Commission. She oversees global health affairs for Baraka and brings a huge amount of experience and enthusiasm to that role. And we've asked her to present a little bit about how Baraka is approaching these data needs in order to drive investment. And Carolina, if it's all right, I'm just going to turn this over to you.
Thank you, James. And thank you especially to Frank and Mukesh for setting the ground so nicely and so enthusiastically. I'm very excited to be here today, and I love the fact that your presentations laid out the opportunities that we have ahead of us rather than the challenges, because I think it's also our role, as people from the global health or from impact investment world to change the narrative. And I love the fact that we should add those lenses of opportunities rather than just looking at the challenges. So I will have a little bit of presentation here. Good. I hope it works. Oops, no. Sorry. See if it. Otherwise, I'm going to have to ask James to help me with the presentation. Yeah. Well, I don't know. So I'll send it to you now, James. I'm sorry about that. But basically, let me just do that. Can you see? Yeah. You have the presentation, right?
I do. I can just pull up that same.
Yeah, that's good. So you can help me go through the slides. Yeah. Sorry about that. But yeah, so basically, while James is loading up the presentation, I think, as said before, basically what motivates us is the very ambitious Sustainable Development Goal number 3, which is health and well-being to all. And I think a lot has been said already by both Mukesh and Frank about the fact that no one can do that alone. And James pointed out very clearly during the introduction that there is more and more agreements and calls from different stakeholders all over the world that more private capital will be needed for that. And we saw that very recently during the Building Bridges events and all of the other events that are popping up that demonstrate very clearly the high interest of all different stakeholders in mobilizing private capital as a means to achieve better health and well-being to all. And maybe I take the advantage of being here today and reminding ourselves that yesterday, by the way, was the Universal Health Coverage Day, and it's basically the world celebrating those commitments, but those commitments should also serve as goals for us to work towards. And basically that also offers, again, an opportunity because there is commitment by the governments, by international agencies and different actors that are really committing to ensure that no one is left behind and health is available, accessible and affordable to all. And again, we have here billions of people living in emerging economies, and they're demanding better and better and more accessible healthcare. We know that at Baraka that's our goal, is to mobilize private capital to do that. We believe that we're in a very good position to do that. And basically what we do is we try to unlock opportunities by catalyzing private capital into that. And we do that basically by an advanced online investment marketplace. I'll go a little bit more into the details, and we really build on a very robust global network of financial, scientific, and health system expertise that we have built over the years. And I'm also very happy to announce today that we've developed a Baraka investment in intelligence dashboard that really expects to guide investments and to make data that sometimes, as Frank was saying recently, how this data is hard to get, it's hard to combine, and we've done that with the intention of making sure that data is easily available and understandable by various investors, to make sure that those dollars will stretch and really impact most people. And I also love the quote from Mentera, which is maximizing impact and optimizing returns, right? So I think that's basically what we intend to do with the Baraka Health Investment Intelligence Dashboard. That can go to the next one, James. Yeah, so we do that by working with an online platform that was co-developed by one of our co-founders at Baraka Impact Finance, Audrey Salian. And basically this platform, as Frank just showed, is also a very good way to be used by different institutions and investors globally to improve visibility, to speed up processes of the due diligence and monitor investments by target. So people can go into the different targets they want to go into the health sector and see what company is doing what kind of previous funding they have received, the impact achieved, but also to help investors communicate among themselves. And this platform has been tested and licensed by various international organizations, including the Aga Khan Foundation, the Grand Challenges Canada, Global Agribusiness, and others. So this is a way for us to increase that visibility and make sure that all of this data is easily available for our investors, and also to connect them with the entrepreneurs and people who are really at the cutting edge of building innovation at the ground level. The next one, James. So of course, there is a variety of actors working in and playing a key role in mobilizing innovation and driving innovation and to transform healthcare in emerging markets. We do that by engaging with thought leaders. Of course, we ourselves at the Baraka team, we have a lot of years and decades of work with that, but we have to communicate, we have to connect, and we really believe in the power of networking and sharing experiences. That's why I'm so honored to be here today with Mukesh and Frank, but also with all of you, so that we can really build on this global health scientific expertise, but also talking to people. And many years of my own medical career were based on resource limited settings, where I've seen firsthand all of the challenges that we had to address on a daily basis to make sure that people had access to good clinical medicine, good quality healthcare, but also overcoming all of these issues in a day-to-day basis. Of course, we can't do that without having a lot of connection and learning from financing and investment specialists that will help us connect and have a common thread that will guide us, not only with the global health challenges, also understanding the drivers and the trends in terms of investments, but also making sure that we're not missing opportunities that we can provide to our investors so that they can maximize the impact and the returns they have when they make investments through us. The next one, James. And of course, as I said before, we're happy to share with you today the Baraka Health Investment Intelligence Dashboard. And basically, we do that by performing comprehensive emerging health market analysis, combining different sets of data. And again, I think both Frank and Mukesh said that very nicely. We have to combine burden of disease, mortality data, but also we have to look into different kinds of data sets that will help us understand a specific context and guide investors to make sure that their dollars are where they should go according to their interests and preferences in terms of investment and impact. So basically what we do this combination of gathering health evidence, be it, of course, morbidity, mortality, highest burden of disease. And I would like just to reiterate what Mukesh has said, that we see now in emerging economies very important increase in non-communicable diseases and health systems in these countries. And where I come from, Brazil, for example, and Asia and India and Africa, and I'm very happy to have a Global South representation here today, and we can speak from our hearts rather than only with our minds. And it's really our health systems are not prepared to deal with that. And we've seen with the recent COVID crisis that the world has witnessed real time that even the very strong health systems could not deal with the burden caused by COVID, and let alone in countries where health systems have been built back in the days based on suboptimal investments and allocations, but also now with the growing concern and burden of non-communicable diseases that will require innovation, that is out of the hospital setting, that it's out of the healthcare settings, that will require people to be seen at their homes, and that will basically be an opportunity to tap into mobile phones and point of care solutions that will bring healthcare closer and closer to patients. Of course, if we think of that, we have to look into overall infrastructure. How far is a village to a health center? How much does a patient or a family have to go to have access to a healthcare setting or to a lab or any of those things? What is the road conditions and what's the travel time? And all of that makes a very important data set that we have to look at, and we look at that to understand the infrastructure, electricity, mobile phone penetration, but also we look very much into capital concentration to make sure that when investors are taking a decision to invest in a certain company that's really innovatively transforming healthcare in that setting, they know, is this kind of innovation receiving a lot of investments already? Where can I put my money into making more and more impact and going where maybe to naive population or to companies that have not yet received a significant amount of funding. Of course, we don't do that alone. We're very proud to have partnered with the Heidelberg Institute of Global Health, led by Professor Till Bernihausen, who is one of the world leaders in developing science to demonstrate the impact of social entrepreneurship and social models for healthcare. And also we have a partnership with Arcanite. It's a Swiss data analytics firm that have been really key to us in understanding and make sure that all of this data that seems very dispersed makes sense in a package that is easy to understand and makes sense to all kinds of investors that we deal with, those who are more familiar with healthcare, but also those who are new into the impact investment world. Next one, James. So I think I'm very happy to have to show that at Baraka we have over 270 companies in our pipeline, and we build our pipeline very carefully and very dearly. As a matter of fact, James and I always say that it's one of our favorite parts of our job is really to talk to these entrepreneurs who are brilliant minds who are on the ground doing the work and who create solutions that maybe a person in Silicon Valley would never come up with that solution because this person would not be familiar with what's going on in that specific context. So they're exposed to the challenges and they really refuse to accept the status quo. So one of the companies that we have in our pipeline that we really work closely with, and we really like what the services they're offering is Access Afia, and Frank has mentioned them, and maybe I'll go into a little bit of details into them. And it's a woman-led, digitally integrated company that works in the slums of Nairobi, in the peri-urban setting, providing more traditional brick and mortar primary care through microclinics, but really working to optimize and to innovate how healthcare is delivered at those settings through telemedicine and digital health. And that's what we see also as a trend. More and more companies will be doing the traditional work, but really in a very innovative way, leveraging on technology, artificial intelligence, and really working on collecting data to optimize their impact. Basically, Access Afia, when we look into a company like Access Afia, we try to look into different, and I think that's a good example of, we have prototypes for these companies that we're happy to share later on. But basically what we look into is what's the percentage of population living in slums to show to investors the market opportunity and the market size, and the population will benefit from that. Of course, the health care workforce density, how many physicians, how many nurses and clinical officers are in that area, to make sure that, you know, whatever digital solution is built makes sense to improve clinical outcomes of that population. And of course, a lot of their program is based on mobile technology and mobile phone. And as Frank said, this is really being a transformative force in emerging economies, and will continue to be. And there estimates that there will be additional 10 billion mobile phones in emerging economies in the coming years. And basically we look at that to see how many people can definitely benefit from that. So this is just a snapshot of what kind of data we use to make sure that when a company is being promoted and being given by us to investors, the case is very clear, and how we can combine those kind of data. The next one, James. Then of course we also have the case of Inaxcel. Inaxcel is an India-based company, and I'm sure Mukesh is very familiar with them. And they are a medical device manufacturer with very interesting multiple and novel medical devices. And then basically they're really addressing the issue of maternal mortality, but also infant mortality and neonatal mortality in India. It's still a big debt from the problems of the past, and it continues to be a high burden in India. And of course, again, moving forward, there will be more and more need to build digital and future-driven solutions, while also fixing problems on the more traditional sense of healthcare. And the medical device sector will be growing significantly, not only in terms of size, but also in terms of optimized solutions. And what they do, basically, they create all of these the solutions that are to address those issues. And one of the data sources that we look, for example, is the healthcare expenditure distribution. So how much is an average Indian family spending on health? How much is the percentage of government spending, and the different kinds of expenditure on health? And we can see, you know, the potential for tapping into that market. The other thing we see is the maternal mortality rates, and how that device and that solution will impact women's lives in India. But also they have patented products, and they're in the process of getting all of the registration in different markets, including FDA and the European market, and also seeing what that solution will generate in terms of impacting and avoiding deaths. Of course, we're talking about an innovation that is really addressing the very remote and very underserved communities in India. So we also looked into access to electricity, for example, because a lot of their products run without electricity, which is really an innovation that's very much tailored to the needs, given that a lot of those rural facilities do not have access to regular electricity. So again, I'm very happy to take questions later, and I thank my colleagues here today, Frank and Mukesh, for the amazing presentations. And Baraka means blessing in Swahili, Arabic, and Hebrew. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carolina. I want to just open up right now because I imagine there are questions. I've got a number of questions and comments of my own for everyone, but I don't want to deny our attendees the opportunity to pose any questions themselves. So feel free to enter into the chat or raise your hand. And I see that there are a lot of comments that I wasn't watching. That maybe you can help me, Debbie, to make sure I do well here in screening these questions.
Of course. I think there have been a lot of introductions in the chat, but I don't see any questions. But if I missed any, please unmute yourself and you can share your question yourself.
While people are forming their thoughts, I wanted to come back to something, Mukesh, that you have emphasized in our conversations, and you said again today, and that is the need for a conveyor belt. And the whole idea, and Frank, you touched on this as well, the continuum of support. At Baraka, we've made a choice, and we don't need to go into that choice necessarily right now, but our focus is dominantly on companies that are reaching that valley of death. The definition of the valley we're trying to address is companies that are raising between 1 million and 20 million. But we could argue that there are gaps all the way along this continuum. It was just our decision to focus there. But a little bit more, I think, about what could be done to create a more effective conveyor belt would be a really interesting conversation to forward a little bit more. Either Mukesh or Frank, did you want to chime in on that a little bit?
Yeah, thanks, James. James, thanks
No,
for that question. Yeah, James, thanks for that question. So we talked about tight unit economics if you are really focused on low income segments and social impact. So one is tight unit economics. Second is we talked about multiple cousins, and with low access to capital. Healthcare is one of the sectors where you require many different competencies. So you require engineering, you require product design, you require clinical, business, financial, right? Many skills, many competencies are required, and you are unlikely to find all of them in an early stage business. So many times it could be a doctor or a biomedical engineer who has come up with an idea, maybe one co-founder bringing in a different skill, but other three would be missing. And raising capital is not their, is not their expertise. They have not sold products to anyone. They have not built organization or businesses. In many cases, we are dealing with first generation entrepreneurs, right? So that is where this continuum of support, this continuum of funding becomes very, very important, because one, they are short on capital. Second, they are short on resources. Third, they're short on expertise, right? With those three, gaps, if the ecosystem doesn't cover for those gaps, and with tight unit economics, we're not going to be, unlocking the true potential of many of the companies that we come across. Now, how do you build that continuum of care? So you talked about Willgrow. We started with an incubator, Willgrow. We work with governments, so biotechnology arm of the government of India, that provides a lot of grant funding. We work with organizations like Grand Challenges, Canada, there is Welcome, Trust. They provide grant capital, right? So many of these organizations come together. Artha is co-investing alongside us when we make an equity investment. Despite that, we also saw that after we addressed many of these early chasms, we found it difficult to unlock debt for working capital. Where debt was available, it was more than 16% interest, in some cases almost going up to 20%, if it was available. In many cases, it wasn't available. When it was available, there was not much difference between the cost of equity and cost of debt. So in that case, we had to structure first loss guarantee products through our LPs, Lemelson Foundation, based in US, where they gave first loss guarantee, and on that, banks gave loans. So, and we also work with many corporates with the CSR, wings to do some of the activities that a typical business wouldn't do. But if you're focused on impact and with so many gaps, you have to address them. In addition to that, in this continuum of care, when we are doing a diligence on a company as an investor, we are not expert on every clinical problem. So we need connections with hospitals before even we do clinical trials, right? Many times you do not want lack of understanding on part of the investing community to become a problem for unlocking capital. So hospitals for clinical trials, hospital for diligence, talking to clinicians becomes important. And last but not the least, going to resource constrained settings. So there are 2 or 3 organizations that operate in places where you don't see much health infrastructure. Talking to them and showing products to them, saying, okay, what will stop this product from being successful in that community? Even if you were to have a CSR intervention and provide it, but many times they would come up with ideas such as, the algorithm needs to be stronger so that a third or fourth standard pass person can really operate that device, right? I think you talked about electricity issues. If it's not there, how do you address it, right? So all these inputs are needed. And in small organization, whether it's grant funded, whether it's angel investors, whether it's impact funding, mainstream funding, you're not going to have all this expertise. And unless you put all those dots together and create a conveyor belt of support, continuum of support, I think we are going to be really not making the progress that is required here. So over to you, James, Frank.
I want to jump on something there, because there's something you brought up which wasn't directly to my last question, but I think Frank, you'll have input on this one as well, and that is the mention of corporate social responsibility, CSRs, and entities like the Lemelson Foundation you just mentioned, and Frank, you just mentioned the way that the Rockefeller Foundation supported that major fellowship program. I think that was the one they supported for you. Those entities, the corporate social responsibility entities of the large multilaterals, as well as the globally oriented large foundations, are also data hungry, right? They have got to wrap their decisions in a lot of data. I'm curious, and I think we will do a future Baraka program that will talk to these entities. But I'm curious what your experience has been in terms of their ability to contribute data perspectives, because they've been doing this for a long time, as well as their demands for additional data from you on the ground, or from the entrepreneurs organizations you're working with. And maybe I'll just turn that over to you, Frank, initially.
Yeah, James, I think you asked a really good question. What we see, for example, is the corporates, because they have the money, they do invest in a fair amount of data collection, but are they collecting the data from the right ponds? That's the question. Are they still fishing in the right ponds? And what you find is many of them have settled into a comfort zone of doing things the way they've always done them, not questioning whether they can deliver more impact with what they're doing. And so they're stuck in the very traditional grant deploying model, where it's so much easier for them to just give grants rather than think about how do we optimize, or some people will say maximize impact with the few dollars that we've got. And so we're having, if we look at them as a source of capital, and in this case, potentially catalytic or concession capital, how do we have them think differently about how they can deploy their capital for greater impact? And how do we contextualize their capital deployment within the bigger framework of recognizing that we have a dearth of enough capital in the social sector? And can they be much more clever with how they deploy capital, co-investing alongside other people, using the capital to de-risk social investments, so that they can be fishing for data in the right places to make better decisions? That mindset shift is where we need to get them to transition to. So one of the programs we're looking to do as AVPA and is to do a program, a catalytic investment program for grant makers on the continent, to help them transition from being traditional grant makers to being catalytic investors. And that way, they can be thinking more about how can I make my $1 crowd in $10 from the private sector, And how do I do that differently? But that is, as I said, it's a space where there's a lot of unconscious incompetence right now. People don't know they don't know. And it's a transition we've got to take them through, both for the management and the boards of these organizations.
Great perspectives. I don't know, Mukesh or Carolina, any more like thoughts on the value of those sectors and the needs of those types of fund allocating entities?
I'm not sure, James, I fully understood your question. So if you can elaborate more, I can try and respond.
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting, and I think that Frank did a nice job of speaking to it, is, Lemelson Foundation you just brought up as an example. So they're willing to come in as to present first loss capital for I guess that's for your current fund or your previous fund. They need data too, right? I mean, they're also data hungry, and so how are their own needs evolving? And frankly, I'll tell you from the Baraka experience, we work with a number of those entities. I don't know whether some of them might actually be on right now. And we often find that they are the holders of data that's unique and necessary for other private capital investors to be informed. So there's this kind of push and pull and value with the corporate social responsibility arms of the large multilaterals, as well as with the big global foundations. So that's kind of the area that I'm interested in talking about, and that I think Frank spoke to. I'm just wondering if you had any other insights on that from your experiences. So maybe Lemelson's a good one to talk to or talk about.
Yeah, Lemelson is an amazing example. They've been in India for now almost 20 years, almost 18, 20 years. And what they have done is they've very systematically looked at issues that hold inventors back, those who are coming up with inventions, what holds them back. And in that process, they have been, not only catalytic, but very flexible in demonstrating success. So their first loss guarantee is not a product that Lemelson had ever done before, or it's not a product that they really intended to do. But they wanted to demonstrate that, why are banks not giving loan? Why are banks charging such a high interest? Because they're seeing too much risk. So they said, okay, let's show them that the risk is not as high as you see it. So let's demonstrate it how this can be done, right? And that also was not a one-off decision. That was driven from a lot of research they did over the years, saying, okay, why is debt capital not available? Why is equity funding not available? At what stages is that gap there? What is the reason for that gap? So I think they carried out almost 1 year of research, looking at many different companies and narrowing down what holds them back. And that research didn't only speak about what holds these companies back, that research also suggested potential solutions. And this first loss guarantee or soft debt funding was one of the options. So this was an easier conversation for all of us to have because it came out of research. It was not an ad hoc response to a challenge that a single company faced. Absolutely a lot of data that went into defining problems, defining solutions, and then demonstrating success through it. Back to you, James.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, maybe James. If I can just elaborate a little bit on that also. I think we need as the impact investment community and different investors. I think we need to find ways to facilitate this entry-level investment, as many people are calling it now. And we see that there's greater and greater interest from various institutions to deploy capital into healthcare innovation. But the data that we have available now still doesn't make too much sense to people who want to invest. So I think it's making sure that we define, and I think we have a lot to learn from other sectors, energy, environment, and education in defining maybe KPIs or indicators that can at least provide this. I see always that as a big funnel, and what can be the facilitator and the enabler to help people take
research or data that shows that this is something that works, even if not from that company, but from other cases somewhere else. Even the approach, is the approach better? Because you can't be putting money to test the approach over 1 year, and if the approach doesn't work, then equity investment is completely gone, right? So these are areas where data can be tremendously helpful. Some of the large disease areas, what are the potential solutions, what are the global gold standards, what has worked, what hasn't worked. Like Carolina said, documenting some of this, I think will make investment decisions easier, because most investors will not have the clinical expertise, the technological expertise, the statistical clarity, efficacy that they require will not be there. So if we can provide data around it, if we can document some of these things, I think we'll be making the investment cycles a lot shorter.
So I like that point, and it segues into what I was actually going to bring up, because in addition to the need for the data and the documentation to better create pictures of the likelihood of success and scalability and viability, you also need to make it clear, clean, and easy to understand. You need to be making bridges for investors who are either not familiar with the local market or not familiar with the health sector. So one thing we think about a lot at Baraka, and I won't pretend that we figured it out yet, is how to make data visually interesting, dynamic, and quickly understood. Because I'm just going to take a gamble here, having talked a little bit with both Mukesh and Frank, and I know Carolina and myself well, we're kind of nerds. So we don't get to use ourselves. We don't get to use ourselves as the litmus test for what works for the average investor. I can look at a lot of documents and be pretty happy doing it, but we have to find ways of condensing the messaging, making stuff easily understood. And any comments you have on that whole issue of visualization and presentation and simplification, I think is also welcome. I mean, Frank, I would offer that I think the site you put together for AVPA is extremely user-friendly. It feels, approachable. And I'm not sure to what degree you were thinking of these issues as you built that.
Yeah, James, listen, we're all learning and we're all growing. I think it's a continuous learning and growth process for all of us. We're iterating consistently, we're taking feedback, and I think on condition that we are moving forward, we shouldn't be scared to fail. On condition that we are failing forward, we should keep going. We're pioneers in this space in many ways, and I think it's an exciting space to be in. So I'm super excited that we're able to contribute in our own little way to what the broader community is trying to build.
Well said. Okay, well, listen, I'm going to make sure that we're open to any other questions or comments from anybody else with us today, and if not, final comments from any of our excellent presenters. I'm really honored that you all found the time to be here. I'm super excited that we had the Global South represented in such a broad forum like this. It was really, really nice to have that kind of representation at such an important conversation about the Global South. So thank you. Thanks very much, Frank, Mukesh, Carolina, and thank you, Deborah Keller, for your incredible coordination skills and all of this. And thank you to all of our participants. I want to quickly tell everyone, we are sending out a survey following this program. It'll go out in the next 24 to 48 hours, and specifically with questions related to the topics covered today on data and health and investment. It's short, and we would greatly appreciate you returning that to us as soon as you receive it. That'll come to you via email. And I think that's it. Without further ado, I want everyone to stay safe. It's a crazy world out there. And to the degree that you're going to celebrate any of the holidays coming up, enjoy those also safely. And we wish you well, and we will be back in February with another Baraka Health and Investment Program.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you for running so smoothly through the session. And thank you to our amazing speaker for joining in. I think some important highlights have been shared today. We've captured it all, so it's all on recording. I ask everyone in the room, if you know someone that should meet our speakers or see the content, please share it. I'll share it along with the survey that James mentioned. And I also share the contact details of all the speakers if you wish to connect with them afterwards, or you have anything you want to share with them. Also from my side, I wish you all hope no stress until Christmas and you a wonderful Christmas time. And I really look forward to seeing you in January at another IFB session. Take care, everybody, and see you soon.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, David. Thank you, James.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.